Charlie Chaplin entered the world on a cold day in 1889, in a small, rough neighborhood of London. His parents were stage performers, but their lives were unstable, full of uncertain jobs and little money. When Charlie was still very young, things became even harder. His father stopped being part of their lives, and his mother struggled with illness and poverty. Charlie remembered nights when the house was quiet because there was no food to cook. He remembered mornings when he and his older brother, Sidney, woke up to the sound of city traffic and the cold air coming through thin walls. And sometimes, they didn't even have walls, just the open streets, where they wrapped themselves in old coats and tried to sleep. Life pushed Charlie into adulthood early. He watched his mother work hard, sewing clothes and performing small acts on stage whenever she could. But her health slowly declined, and one day, she could no longer perform. The family had no money left. Charlie and Sidney were sent to a workhouse, a place for poor and homeless children. The rooms were crowded, the food was simple, and the days felt long. Still, Charlie found something bright inside all that darkness. He made jokes. He pretended to trip and fall in funny ways. He made silly faces. Even when life was painful, he discovered that laughter, his own and others, gave him strength. It was in those early years, surrounded by struggle, that Charlie learned the truth he would carry for the rest of his life: when you can laugh, you can survive. As Charlie grew older, life continued to test him. After leaving the workhouse, he tried to help his mother however he could, but money was always missing. Some days he sold newspapers. Other days he polished shoes for a few pennies. But deep inside, he knew these small jobs were not his future. Charlie felt something stronger calling him, the stage. When he was about 9 years old, he joined a small dance group for children. They performed simple shows around London. The first time Charlie stepped onto a real stage, he felt the warm lights on his face, and the crowd's attention filled the air like electricity. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a poor boy or a homeless child. He felt seen. He felt alive. Charlie had a natural talent that surprised the adults around him. He could move in funny, unexpected ways. He could copy the walk of a policeman, the stiff posture of a rich man, or the clumsy steps of someone trying to look important. Everywhere he went, he observed people carefully. Their mistakes became his comedy. Their movements became his performances. By age 12, Charlie was performing in small theaters. They were not glamorous places. Sometimes the air smelled like old wood and dust, sometimes the audience was rough and noisy, but Charlie didn't care. Every show was a chance to escape poverty, even if only for a few minutes. But life at home grew heavier. His mother's mental health worsened, and she spent long periods in the hospital. Charlie and Sidney had to survive on their own again. The fear of losing everything never left his mind. Still, every time he stepped on stage, he remembered something important: the world could be painful, but comedy could open a door out of it, and Charlie was determined to walk through that door. By the time Charlie reached his teenage years, he already knew what he wanted. He wanted to be a performer, not just a good one, but a great one. But dreams don't pay rent, and dreams don't buy food. So Charlie kept doing small jobs in theaters, carrying props, helping actors, cleaning the stage, anything that allowed him to stay close to the world he loved. One afternoon, when Charlie was about 14, a manager from a traveling theater company noticed him. The manager had seen Charlie practicing funny walks behind the curtains. He chuckled and said, "Keith, you're funnier than half the men I pay. How would you like to join our show?" It felt like a miracle. Charlie joined the theater company and began traveling across England. They performed in towns he had never even heard of. Some nights, the audience cheered so loudly that Charlie's heart raced with excitement. Other nights, the crowd barely paid attention, and Charlie had to work twice as hard to win a single laugh. But every show taught him something. He learned timing, how long to pause before a joke. He learned rhythm, how to move so the audience expected one thing and he delivered another. He learned courage, how to stand in front of hundreds of strangers even when he was tired, hungry, or sad. At night, when the performers returned to their small rooms, the others would go to sleep. But Charlie stayed awake, practicing in front of the mirror. He watched the shape of his face change with every expression. He tried out new walks, new falls, new characters. He was building a skill the world had not yet seen. Still, life remained a battle. His mother's health continued to decline, and he often sent whatever money he earned back to support her. There were days he wondered if he would ever escape poverty. But then he remembered how people laughed when he performed, how even one smile could change the whole room. Charlie realized something important: if he kept working, kept learning, and kept dreaming, the world might one day know his name. He just didn't know how soon that day would come. As Charlie entered his late teens, he had become one of the most promising young performers in England. His timing was sharp, his movements were original, and audiences remembered him long after the show ended. But even with all his progress, Charlie still felt something missing. The theaters he performed in were small, the pay was low, and the future felt uncertain. Then one day, everything changed. An American theater company called the Fred Karno Troupe invited Charlie's group to join a tour in the United States. America, at that time, was the land of opportunity, big cities, bright lights, and endless possibilities. The idea of traveling across the ocean felt unreal to Charlie. He was a poor boy from London. How could he go to America? But the offer was real, and Charlie said why yes. In 1910, he boarded a ship with the other performers. It was the first time he had ever left England. As the boat moved across the cold Atlantic waters, Charlie spent hours standing on the deck, imagining what America would look like. Tall buildings, busy streets, crowds of people, all waiting to be entertained. When the troupe arrived in New York City, Charlie's eyes widened. Everything was bigger, louder, and faster than anything he had ever seen. The theaters were bright, the streets were full of life, and the people seemed hungry for new entertainment. Their first show in America was a huge success. The audience laughed so hard that Charlie felt the sound echo inside him. This was different from England. This was a place where talent could grow, where a poor boy could become something more. During the tour, Charlie's name began to spread quietly among theater managers. They noticed his unique style, his natural charm, and his ability to make people laugh without saying a single word. One winter evening in California, a small film company manager approached him backstage. He said, "Son, Jube got something special. Ever thought about acting in motion pictures?" Charlie had never imagined himself on camera. Movies were new, silent, and mysterious, but he knew one thing: this could be his chance. Charlie accepted the offer to work in motion pictures, even though he didn't fully understand how films were made. In 1914, he joined Keystone Studios, one of the earliest movie companies in Hollywood. The studio was loud, chaotic, and full of energy. Cameras rolled all day, actors ran around in costumes, and directors shouted instructions over the noise. On his first day, Charlie felt nervous. Movies didn't have sound back then. Everything depended on clear expressions, sharp movements, and strong characters. The director told Charlie to find a costume for his first scene. Charlie walked into the wardrobe room and started picking pieces almost at random: an old bowler hat, a small toothbrush mustache, a tight jacket, baggy pants, and shoes that were too large. He looked in the mirror, and suddenly, the character appeared. A funny, charming, slightly clumsy man. A man who struggled, but never gave up. A man with hope in his eyes. This character would become one of the most famous figures in film history, the Tramp. When Charlie stepped in front of the camera dressed as the Tramp for the first time, something magical happened. His movements flowed naturally. His expressions were perfect. The crew laughed so hard that they had to stop filming. The director shouted, "That's it. That's the character." Audiences loved the Tramp instantly. They loved how he tried to act like a gentleman even when he wore torn clothes. They loved how he stumbled, fell, got back up, and kept going. They loved how he could make them laugh one moment and cry the next. Charlie felt something change inside him. For the first time, he wasn't just a poor boy trying to survive. He was a rising star, someone the world wanted to watch. But he also knew one thing: this was only the beginning. With the Tramp character, Charlie became one of the most talked about performers in Hollywood. Every week, movie theaters showed new silent comedies, and Charlie's films were the ones people lined up to see. Crowds laughed until their stomachs hurt. Children copied his walk in the streets. Adults repeated his famous gestures at work. But Charlie wasn't dissatisfied with just acting. He wanted control over the stories, the jokes, the emotions, everything. So he began learning how to direct. He watched the cameraman, asked questions, studied how scenes were built, and practiced until he understood the craft better than anyone around him. Soon after, Keystone Studios trusted him with his own films. Charlie's directing style was slow, careful, and detailed that he sometimes filmed the same scene dozens of times until it felt perfect. Some directors complained he took too long. But Charlie didn't care that he believed the audience deserved his best work. The harder he worked, the more famous he became. Newspapers printed his photos. People wrote letters begging for new films. Studio bosses admired him because his movies brought in huge profits, but behind all the success, Charlie stayed the same inside. He remembered the cold nights in London. He remembered sleeping on streets. He remembered his mother's struggles. And he remembered how laughter saved him. He wanted his films to do the same for others, to help people forget their troubles, even if only for a short time. In the mid-1910s, Charlie's fame exploded across the world. He wasn't just an actor anymore. He was a symbol of hope. His character, the tramp, became a friend to millions, someone who failed, fell, and was pushed around, but always stood up again with a smile. As Charlie looked at the growing crowds, he realized something powerful. He had gone from a homeless boy to one of the most beloved stars on earth, but he hadn't reached his peak yet. Even bigger things were coming. Success came quickly, faster than Charlie ever expected. Within a year, the tramp was known across America. Movie theaters filled up whenever his name appeared on the poster. Children copied his walk. Adults repeated his jokes. Even people who struggled in life felt comfort watching him, because the tramp reminded them of themselves, a simple person trying to survive in a complicated world. But behind the scenes, Charlie still lived with fear. He worried about money, about stability, about losing everything he had just earned. The memories of homelessness stayed with him. Every time he saw a man sleeping on the street, he remembered his own childhood in London, the cold nights, the hunger, the uncertainty. Charlie worked non-stop. He filmed all day, wrote ideas at night, and practiced new movements between scenes. He pushed himself harder than anyone else. Success didn't make him relax, it made him more focused, more serious, more determined. Soon, Charlie felt limited at Keystone Studios. He wanted more control over the stories, the characters, the humor, everything. He knew that to create true art, he needed freedom. So he left Keystone and joined another studio where they offered him something he had never had before, creative power. With that freedom, Charlie began shaping the future of comedy. He wrote scripts. He directed scenes. He edited films. He created emotion through silence. America had given him a chance, now he wanted to give the world a reason to remember him. Part 7. A new level of greatness. By the early 1920s, Charlie Chaplin wasn't just a star, was a phenomenon. His films didn't just make people laugh, they touched their hearts. Audiences felt like they knew him personally, as if the tramp was a friend who visited them through the movie screen. But Charlie wasn't dissatisfied. He wanted to push boundaries, to tell deeper stories, to show that silent films could be powerful, meaningful, and artistic. In 1921, Charlie released one of his most important films, The Kid. It wasn't just a comedy. It was a story about love, struggle, and the bond between an orphan boy and the tramp. While filming, Charlie remembered his own childhood, the loneliness, the fear of being separated from his family, the feeling of being unwanted. Those emotions shaped every scene. The world laughed at the humor, but they also cried at the pain behind it. The Kid became a huge success. People lined up for blocks just to buy a ticket. Newspapers called Charlie a genius. Other filmmakers began studying his work, trying to understand how one man could mix humor and heartbreak so perfectly. But Charlie didn't slow down. He kept writing, directing, and acting. Each new film was more ambitious than the last. He wasn't just entertaining the world, he was changing it. Even though he had money, fame, and respect, Charlie stayed rooted in one truth. He knew what it felt like to have nothing, and that feeling guided every story he created. Charlie's films at Keystone Studios quickly became the talk of the town. Audiences crowded theaters just to watch the tramp's newest adventure. People laughed at his silly walks, his creative escapes, and the way he tried to act polite even when everything around him fell apart. Soon, movie companies began fighting to hire him. In 1915, Charlie signed a new contract with the S&A Film Company, one that paid him more money than he had ever dreamed of earning. Suddenly, the poor boy from the streets of London was one of the highest-paid actors in America. But with success came pressure. Charlie knew audiences expected more from him. Simply funny scenes were not enough anymore. He wanted to create stories with emotion, films that touched the heart. So he began writing and directing his own movies. He worked long hours, sometimes repeating a single scene dozens of times until it felt perfect. One day, while filming, someone asked him why he worked so hard. Charlie replied softly, "If they give me their time, I must give them my best." And his best was extraordinary. Movies like The Tramp and The Bank made people cry and laugh at the same time. Critics called him a genius. Children copied his walk in the streets. Adults admired his courage and creativity. Charlie Chaplin was no longer just a performer. He was a star, shining brighter with every film, but he wasn't done climbing yet. Part 7. Creating his own studio. By 1917, Charlie had become one of the most famous faces in the world. His films were shown across America, Europe, and Asia. Everywhere he went, people recognized the bowler hat, the cane, and the little mustache, but Charlie wanted more freedom. He didn't want studios telling him what to film or how fast he had to work. He wanted full control over his art. So he did something bold. In 1919, Charlie teamed up with three other legends, Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and the Griffith. Together, they created their own film company, United Artists. This was a historic moment. For the first time, artists, not businessmen, controlled the studio. Charlie could now make films exactly the way he imagined them. At his own studio, Charlie began working on movies with deeper stories. He focused on the struggles of ordinary people, poverty, loneliness, hope, love, and courage. He believed that comedy didn't have to be empty, it could carry a message. During this time, he created masterpieces like The Kid 1921, where he played a poor man who finds and raises an abandoned child. The film was funny, heartbreaking, and incredibly human. Audiences cried in theaters. Critics called it one of the most beautiful films ever made. Charlie stood on the set, watching the success of The Kid, and whispered to himself, "I have taken my pain and turned it into something that heals others." His dream was coming true, but the world around him was changing fast. Part 8, Silent No More. By the late 1920s, Hollywood was entering a new era. Movies were no longer silent. New technology allowed films to include sound and voices. Audiences loved this new style, and studios rushed to produce talkies. But Charlie was unsure. The Tramp was a universal character, funny in any language because he didn't speak. His emotions were clear through movement, not words. Charlie worried that giving the Tramp a voice might ruin the magic. Studio executives pushed him to adapt. "Sound is the future," they said. "Your films must change too." But Charlie refused to rush. He believed that silence had its own power, that the smallest gesture could express what words could not. While other filmmakers ran toward talking pictures, Charlie took his time. In 1931, he released City Lights, a silent film in a world full of sound. Many people predicted it would fail. They were wrong. City Lights became one of the greatest films ever made. Audiences fell in love with the Tramp all over again, laughing at his struggles and crying at his gentle heart. Albert Einstein himself attended the premiere and gave Charlie a warm hug afterward. "You remind us," Einstein said, "that laughter is a universal language." Charlie had proved something important. True art doesn't follow trends, it follows truth. But soon, he would step into sound in a way nobody expected. With the Tramp character, Charlie Chaplin became a sensation almost overnight. People rushed to theaters just to see his newest short films. In big cities like New York and Chicago, long lines formed outside movie houses. Even in small towns, where entertainment was limited, families saved a few coins just to watch Charlie on the screen. The Tramp was more than a character, he was a symbol of hope. He made people laugh during hard times, especially as the world moved toward war and uncertainty. Producers quickly noticed Charlie's growing popularity. Soon, he began earning more money than he had ever dreamed of, far more than the poor homeless boy from London could even imagine. But success didn't change Charlie's heart. He still remembered the cold nights on the streets, the hunger, and the fear. Those memories guided his work and kept him humble. Charlie started learning every aspect of filmmaking. He watched how directors framed scenes. He studied how lighting changed emotions. He practiced timing so carefully that even a simple blink could make audiences laugh. He wanted control, creative control, to tell stories in his own way, and soon, he got it. Charlie signed a major contract, giving him the freedom to write, direct, and star in his films. It was rare for someone so young to have such power, but Charlie had earned it. He had become something the film industry had never seen before, a true artist of silent comedy. Still, the world outside the studio was changing fast. And Charlie knew he needed to change with it. Part 7, building his own studio in 1917, at just 28 years old, Charlie Chaplin made a bold decision, one that would shape the future of cinema. He built his own film studio in Hollywood. It wasn't huge, but it was his. A simple wooden building, a small team, and a dream big enough to fill the whole world. Here, Charlie created films exactly the way he wanted. He wrote scripts slowly, sometimes taking months for a single idea. He demanded perfect timing, often filming one scene hundreds of times until it felt right. Actors waited patiently as Charlie adjusted props by a few inches or rehearsed a tiny gesture again and again. Some people called him difficult, some said he was too slow. But Charlie didn't take care. He believed that great art needed time. Inside the studio, he was the director, the actor, the writer, the composer, everything at once. Outside the studio, he was becoming a global icon. His films reached countries he had never visited. Children copied his walk. Adults admired his courage. Even those who didn't speak English understood him, because his comedy spoke the universal language of humanity. But Charlie wasn't just interested in laughs. His heart pushed him toward something deeper, telling stories about real people and real struggles, and the world was about to see that side of him. Part 8, the artist with a message. As Charlie matured, his films also grew more meaningful. The tramp wasn't only a funny character anymore, he became a voice for people facing poverty, injustice, and hardship. In movies like The Kid 1921, Charlie blended comedy with emotion. The film told the story of a poor man who protects and loves an abandoned child. Audiences laughed, but they also cried. Charlie had proven he was more than a comedian, he was a storyteller with a message. His films began touching hearts around the world. People saw their own struggles reflected in the tramp's journey. They saw hope in his courage and beauty in his kindness, but fame also brought pressure. Every new movie had to be better than the last. Crowds expected miracles, and critics watched his every move. Charlie spent long nights rewriting scenes and perfecting gestures. Sometimes he felt lonely, even surrounded by success. Meanwhile, the world was changing again. New technology arrived. Sound movies no longer had to be silent. Many silent actors feared this new era, but Charlie was different. He believed that sound shouldn't take away the magic of silent storytelling. He was determined to protect the tramp's world, and his greatest silent masterpiece was still ahead of him. Part 9, Modern Times and Unforgettable Brilliance. In 1936, during the Great Depression, Charlie released Modern Times, a film that captured the struggles of ordinary workers in an industrial world. Factories were growing, machines were taking over jobs, and people felt lost and powerless. Charlie used comedy to show these challenges in a way people had never seen before. The tramp got caught inside giant gears, he struggled to keep up with a fast-moving assembly line, he danced between chaos and hope with his usual charm. Even though sound films were everywhere, Charlie chose to keep Modern Times mostly silent. He believed the tramp didn't need words to speak to the world. And he was right. The film became a universal masterpiece. People laughed, cried, and felt understood. The tramp represented them, their worries, their dreams, their desire for a better life. But something important happened after Modern Times. Charlie realized that the silent era was ending, the world was moving toward talking pictures, and audiences expected new things. He knew he had to decide whether to let the tramp continue, or let him go. And that choice would change everything. Charlie's success. With Keystone Studios spread quickly across Hollywood. Within just a few months, he became one of the most recognizable faces in silent films. His pay increased, his responsibilities grew, and he was given more creative freedom. But with success came pressure. Studios expected fast results, sometimes several films in a single month. Charlie refused to rush. He believed comedy needed planning, timing, and heart. He began directing his own films, crafting every detail himself. He wrote the stories, acted in them, and decided how each scene should look. So many directors found this annoying, but audiences loved the results. Movies like The Tramp, The Bank, and The Champion made Charlie Chaplin a household name. Theater owners placed his name outside their buildings in big letters. Children imitated his walk in the streets. Reporters lined up just to talk to him. Yet even with all the fame, Charlie stayed grounded. He remembered the cold nights in London, the long days in the workhouse, and his motor struggles. Those memories shaped his art. His comedy wasn't just silly, It was filled with emotion, humanity, and hope. Charlie realized something powerful. His pain had turned into his greatest gift. Part 7. Building his own studio by the early 1920s, Charlie Chaplin was no longer just an actor, he was one of Hollywood's most important creators. But he wanted more control. He wanted to make films his own way, without anyone rushing him. So he made a bold decision. Together with 3 other great artists, Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and D.W. Griffith, Charlie co-founded United Artists, a new film company created by artists, for artists. It was a revolutionary idea. Instead of working for studios, artists would own their work and keep their creative freedom. Soon after, Charlie built his own film studio in Hollywood. A place where he could take his time, perfect every scene, and create stories that touched the heart. This is where he made some of his greatest works: The Kid, The Gold Rush, City Lights, and Modern Times. Charlie spent hours planning the smallest details. If a scene didn't feel right, he filmed it again. And again. And again. Some days he shot for 12 hours without saying a word, using only body language to express emotion. People sometimes called him a perfectionist. Charlie didn't mind that. He believed that stories should make people feel something real. And he wasn't just creating films, he was changing cinema forever. Part 8. The man behind the comedy. As Charlie grew older, he began reflecting on life more deeply. Behind the funny walk, behind the mustache and bowler hat, there was a thoughtful, sensitive man who cared about the world. He saw poverty, unfairness, and suffering everywhere, and he used his films to speak about it. And The Kid. He showed the love between a poor man and an abandoned child. And Modern Times. He portrayed the struggles of workers in a fast-changing world. And City Lights. He told the heartbreaking story of a blind girl who could not see the man who saved her life. People laughed at Charlie's comedy, but they also cried. They walked away from his films thinking about life differently. Off camera, Charlie lived simply. He loved music, reading, and long walks. He missed his mother deeply and often thought about her courage during hard times. Even with fame and money, he never forgot where he came from. Charlie understood a truth many people miss: the greatest comedy often comes from the deepest pain. Part 9. A changing world. By the late 1930s, sound had arrived in movies. Talking pictures, talkies, were taking over Hollywood. Most silent film stars disappeared, unable to adapt. People wondered, would Charlie Chaplin survive this change? Charlie believed the tramp should stay silent. The tramp belonged to the world, not to one language. So Charlie kept making silent-style films long after everyone else switched to sound. But in 1940, he finally broke the silence with one of his most powerful movies, The Great Dictator. In it, he played 2 roles: a poor Jewish barber and a loud, dangerous dictator who looked suspiciously like a real leader rising in Europe at that time. The film ended with a long, emotional speech about peace, kindness, and humanity. The world had never heard Charlie Chaplin speak on screen before, and when he finally spoke, he moved millions of people. It was a brave moment, one that proved Charlie wasn't just a comedian. He was an artist with a voice that mattered.